The most expensive truck Rideau Performance Group had ever engineered sat dead in a climate chamber at minus 32 degrees Celsius, and nobody on the floor could explain why. 9 days. That's how long their team had been running diagnostic cycles on the Kodiak series transmission, pulling apart cold weather data, arguing over torque calibration tables, flying in consultants from Detroit and Munich who looked at the numbers and shrugged. 9 days of a 4.2 million prototype sitting in a refrigerated testing cell while the Transport Canada certification window closed like a vice. Then, on the 10th morning, it ran perfectly. Nobody had touched it that night. Nobody was supposed to be in engineering block C past 7 o'clock. But the overnight security log had a gap. 48 minutes between a badge scan from a contract cleaning crew and the next recorded entry. And when the lead engineer powered up the system at 6:15 a.m., the transmission found its range on the first cold crank, settled into a rhythm so clean it sounded like it was apologizing for the trouble. Someone had fixed it. Nobody knew who. Alec Fontaine found out about the security review the same way he found out most things at Rideau Performance Group. Through the mop closet on the second floor, where sound traveled up through a ventilation grate from the project management office directly below. He wasn't supposed to be listening. He was supposed to be changing out the recycling bins. But when you'd once sat in the meetings happening in that room, when you'd written the original transmission specification that was now being dissected for the third week in a row, it was hard to walk away. He changed the bins anyway, took longer than usual. Alec had been doing overnight contract cleaning at Rideau's facility outside Kitchener for 14 months, 3 nights a week, 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. He drove the 40 minutes from Hartfield in his truck and mopped floors and emptied waste paper from the desks of people who didn't know his name. He didn't volunteer it. He'd worked too hard to make himself forgettable. During the day, he ran Fontaine Auto, a 2-bay garage on the main street of Hartfield that fixed what the town needed fixed. Oil changes, brake jobs, the occasional timing chain. His hands knew the work without having to think. That was the point. He'd left Rideau 5 years ago, 3 weeks after Caroline's funeral. Walked into the HR office, signed whatever they put in front of him, and drove away from the most important work of his career without looking in the rearview mirror. Cora had been 2 years old. She wouldn't remember any of it. That was also the point. The thing about grief is that it doesn't leave room for ambition. For a year after Caroline died, Alec operated on a frequency just slightly below functional. He fed Cora. He changed her. He read her the same board books until the pages fell out. He slept badly and missed appointments and forgot what day it was sometimes, which mattered less than people expected, because when your wife is gone, the days mostly feel the same anyway. The garage came later. A friend of Caroline's family knew someone selling the lease. The work was honest and quiet and required exactly as much of him as he had to give, which, in those years, wasn't much. He'd been okay with that. He'd told himself he was okay with that. The mop closet on the second floor of Engineering Block C told a different story. 14 months of standing near a ventilation grate, listening to meetings he used to lead, tracking the development of a truck system that had started as his drawings on his drafting table. Back when he still believed that building things that could survive Canadian winters was the most important thing a person could do with an engineering degree. He'd left a back door in the building's access system, too. He'd designed the building's security layout in 2016. Nobody had changed the override protocols. That was why he'd taken the cleaning contract. He wasn't proud of that. The problem with the Kodiak series had been obvious to him from the first week he heard the engineers discussing it through the grate. Thermal contraction in the transmission housing at extreme cold. The specific coefficient he'd calculated for the original casting was fine. But someone had redesigned the housing 3 years ago, switching to a lighter alloy that saved $38 per unit at scale. The new alloy had a different thermal expansion profile. At minus 30 or colder, the tolerances shifted enough that the clutch pack couldn't find its seating position on a cold start. He'd written a footnote about exactly this scenario in Appendix D of the original design brief. 12 lines, flagged in red. 9 days of engineers looking everywhere except Appendix D. So at 2:19 a.m. on a Tuesday in February, Alec Fontaine let himself into engineering block C, walked to the climate chamber, and fixed it. He brought his own instruments, a calibrated thermal probe he'd kept in a tackle box under his workbench at the garage, his name scratched off the handle. He machined the necessary shim on a shop lathe from raw stock, toleranced it by hand, verified the clutch seating at simulated -35. He was done before 4. He cleaned the area twice, left no tools, signed out through the ventilation access he'd used to enter. At 5:45 a.m., he was mopping the lobby near the front entrance when the day shift started arriving. He heard the shout from engineering block C at 7:03. Heard it again, louder, from the second floor at 7:11. He was loading his cleaning cart into the service elevator when 3 engineers ran past him arguing about whether to run diagnostics again before telling anyone. Alec pushed the cart into the elevator and went home to Hartfield. He made Cora scrambled eggs. She told him about the book she was reading, something about a girl who discovers her grandmother is secretly a lighthouse keeper. He listened carefully. He made a mental note to find the next book in the series. He thought briefly that it was over. He was wrong about that. Stuart Barton called the first security meeting at 8 a.m. Alec didn't know this until later, when the details filtered down through the ventilation grate over subsequent overnight shifts. But Barton, VP of Product Engineering, 15-year veteran of Rideau, the man who had championed the alloy switch to save the $38 per unit, Barton had a security consultant on retainer. The gap in the overnight log bothered him in a specific way. The kind of specific that told Alec the man understood, at some level, that this was personal. The call came on a Thursday afternoon, while Alec was underneath a 2019 Ram at the garage. He heard his phone buzzing on the tool cart, let it go to voicemail. It buzzed again. He slid out from under the truck and looked at the screen. Rideau Performance Group, main number. Mr. Fontaine. The voice was a woman's, young. Something held tight underneath the professional tone, like a cable under load. This is Dana Price. I know who you are, Miss Price. He'd watched her take over the company after her father's stroke. Watched from the mop closet, mostly. How did you get this number? It's on file with our contract cleaning vendor. A pause. I'd like you to come in tomorrow. 8 a.m., my office. I have a garage to open at 8. I think this conversation is more important than the garage, Mr. Fontaine. She hung up before he could decide whether she was right. Dana Price's office was on the 4th floor of the main building. Alec had cleaned it exactly once, a Thursday in October when the regular crew was short-staffed. He'd noted the photographs on the credenza. Dana, at what looked like a convocation, her father beside her, the old man's hand on her shoulder, like he was trying to give her the weight of something important. He'd left the frames exactly as he found them. She was standing at the window when he came in, back straight, like she'd been taught that standing fully upright cost something. She looked tired. She looked like someone who had been handed more than she'd asked for and was determined not to drop it. The transmission, she said. He said nothing. Our security team went back through the climate chamber footage. The exterior camera on Block C, the one that covers the ventilation access panel on the north side, had a 12-minute buffer delay we weren't aware of. She set a tablet on the desk and turned it toward him, a still frame. The quality was poor. The figure in it was wearing a cleaning crew jacket and carrying a tackle box. I should fire you, Dana said. Outlined access. Improper use of proprietary equipment. About 8 different clauses in the contract cleaning agreement. Then, fire me. I can't. She picked the tablet up. Because Stuart Barton wants me to. And I've learned in the last 4 months that when Stuart Barton wants something very badly, I should find out why before I give it to him. He redesigned the housing casting, Alec said. Yes. The original specification called for a specific alloy. The thermal expansion coefficient was matched to the clutch pack tolerances at -40. It's in Appendix D. I've read Appendix D. She paused. The author of record on that document is listed as the Rideau Product Engineering Division, no individual name. He said nothing. I've also been reading internal correspondence from 2015 and 2016. There are a lot of emails where someone with the initials AF is raising very specific objections to cost reduction decisions on the Kodiak chassis program. She tilted her head slightly. The surname matching those initials isn't in our current employee directory, but it is on a non-disclosure agreement my father signed in 2019. The window behind her showed a gray Ontario sky, the kind of February gray that was less a color than an absence of one. My wife died, Alec said, not as an explanation, just as the fact that it was. I know, Dana said quietly. I'm sorry. I have a 7-year-old. I know that too. I left because I needed to be somewhere my daughter could find me, not in a design office at midnight, not on a flight to Stuttgart, not in a meeting defending a specification against 20 people who wanted to shave costs. I needed to be in Hartfield, making eggs in the morning. At the school pickup, he stopped. That's not something I expect you to understand. My father worked 18-hour days until his stroke, Dana said. Her voice didn't change. I understand more than you think. She moved around the desk and sat, not in the executive chair, but in the second visitor chair beside Alec. A small thing, but he noticed it. The housing alloy isn't the only problem, he said. She looked at him. There's a secondary issue. The torque management software, the cold weather calibration file. It was updated in 2021, but whoever updated it used the old housing thermal model, the one from my original design. It doesn't match the new alloy's expansion curve. He watched her face. She was keeping up. Under sustained cold load, true Alberta winter conditions, sustained highway speeds below -35. The software will send a torque command the hardware can't execute cleanly. Not a catastrophic failure. A jerk. A hesitation. On ice at speed, that's enough. Dana was very still. I wrote a warning about the calibration dependency in the original documentation. Appendix D, page 47. Your engineering team didn't update the calibration because they didn't know the node existed. Because your name was removed from the documentation, she said. He didn't answer that. How do I know you're telling me the truth? You don't. But the certification tests are in 11 days. If I'm right, and the Transport Canada evaluators run the cold weather protocol in a real Alberta scenario, the truck will hesitate on a simulated icy descent. They'll fail it. Or they'll certify it, and the first driver who takes a switchback on the Coquihalla in January will find out on their own. He stood up. Either way, I have a garage to open. My daughter has a spelling test this afternoon, and she asked me to quiz her on the way home from school. He made it as far as the door. Page 47, Dana said behind him. I'll have my team read it tonight. Read it yourself, he said. You'll understand it. Your father made sure of that. He didn't look back to see her expression. That evening, Cora brought home a drawing from school. She'd been pressing autumn leaves between wax paper and drawing around them. This one was 2 figures standing in front of a building, one tall, one small, with a big orange sun taking up half the sky above them. She'd printed something across the top in careful, uneven letters. My dad fixes things nobody else can. He read it twice, stuck it to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a maple leaf. His phone rang at 10:45 p.m., a Kitchener number he didn't recognize. Alec, an older man's voice deliberate, Pete Arsenault, tooling specialist, Kodiak chassis program, 14 years ago. He remembered Pete, the kind of engineer who showed up early and never left anything half-finished. Dana Price called me today, Pete said, asked who would have known the original chassis program well enough to fix the transmission without access to current documentation. A pause. She's been in that lab all week, Alec. She read the whole Appendix D brief, every page. Barton's been telling her father's board for 3 years that the original team cut corners. He erased you, then used the blank space to write himself a different story. I know what he did. The calibration file issue you flagged. Dana brought it to the engineering lead this morning. They confirmed it in 2 hours. 2 hours, Alec. 9 days they couldn't find the transmission problem. 2 hours to confirm the calibration risk once someone pointed them to the right page. Alec looked at the drawing on the fridge. I'm not going back, he said. No, Pete said, but maybe you could finish what you started, just this once. The second meeting with Dana Price was different. She came to Hartfield, drove herself in a gray pre-production Kodiak, which told him she had either a sense of humor or a sense of purpose. She sat in the waiting area of Fontaine Auto while Alec finished a brake job on a retired schoolteacher's Civic, and then she followed him into the back bay and stood at his workbench while he walked her through the calibration dependency on an old laptop he'd kept from his Rideau years, the one with the original model files in an encrypted folder. She asked good questions, precise ones, the kind that told him she wasn't performing comprehension, she actually had it. "I can have the calibration file corrected in 48 hours, she said, "with your input on the parameters. You don't need me in the building for that." "No, but I'd like you there." She looked around the garage. The tools hung in order on the pegboard, the handwritten job tickets, Cora's drawing taped to the side of the parts cabinet, not permanently, just for this. "And after?" "After, you go back to Hartfield, if that's what you want." She met his eyes. "But I'm ending Stuart Bartnott's contract with the company, effective this week. I have 3 years of procurement records showing he redirected supplier rebates to a numbered holding company he controls. That's where his attention has been. That's why the documentation got sloppy. That's why your name disappeared." She paused. "You don't have to fight that battle. But I'm fighting it, and I thought you should know." He spent 2 days at the Rideau facility. He went in through the front entrance. He wore his own clothes, not a cleaning crew jacket. The engineers were younger than he'd expected from the ventilation grate, and they were good. They fixed the calibration file in 31 hours. He checked it 4 times. On the second afternoon, the lead engineer, a young woman named Priya, who couldn't have been more than 28, asked him point blank, "Are you the AF from the original brief?" He said yes. She nodded slowly, the way people nodded when something that hadn't made sense finally did. "Appendix D," she said. "We're making it required reading for every new hire on the Kodiak program." He drove back to Hartfield that evening. The certification tests passed 2 weeks later. Transport Canada signed off without comment, which was exactly how he wanted it. No drama. Just a truck that wouldn't fail a driver on the Coquihalla in January. Dana Price sent him a letter, a physical one, on company letterhead, formal and brief. It acknowledged his contribution to the Kodiak program and indicated that Rideau intended to formally restore authorship credit to the original design documentation. There was a single handwritten line at the bottom, below her signature. "My father would have fixed it the same way you did. Thank you." He stuck it to the fridge, next to Cora's drawing. That spring, Cora turned 8. She wanted her birthday party at the garage, which Alec had not anticipated, but which turned out to mean 6 children in safety goggles, watching him demonstrate how a hydraulic jack worked, and then eating cake on upturned milk crates. Mrs. Chouinard came. Pete Arsenal drove out from Kitchener and brought a card, and said almost nothing, which was exactly right. Alec watched Cora explain the hydraulic jack to her friends, getting 2 of the 3 concepts exactly correct, and felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years. Not happiness exactly, because happiness had always seemed too simple a word for something that had to coexist with grief, but something adjacent to it, something that meant he was where he was supposed to be, doing what he was supposed to be doing, being fully himself for the first time in longer than he wanted to count. He was still the quiet man in the small garage in Hartfield. That hadn't changed. But he was done pretending the other part of him had never existed, done treating it like something that needed to stay hidden to keep the rest of his life intact. Caroline would have told him, probably, that hiding had never really been his nature to begin with, that he'd just needed long enough to believe it himself. He was starting to think she was right about most things.